Hi, Lisa. I'm so excited for our conversation today. I know we have a million things to talk about and not a ton of time. So I want to just welcome all of our listeners live and those who will be watching later on by um, watching the recording. Welcome. We'd love to know where you're joining us from. So please use the chat and let us know where you're joining us from. There is a slight delay, about a 20-second delay. We're using Restream to stream this on LinkedIn, YouTube, and Facebook. So bear with us on that delay. We also want to make sure that this is an interactive session. So ask your questions. We'll monitor again the chat and make sure we are answering questions. With that, I want to welcome my great colleague and friend Lisa Vuona to today's conversation. We are talking all things resumes, tips and strategies for crafting standout resumes, and making sure we touch on a lot of common questions that come our way and questions that are related to today's world and how we navigate job searches and applications for positions in the world today. So, everyone, again, we're live streaming, so let us know where you're joining us from. And on behalf of all of our live and recorded viewers, Lisa, welcome to the conversation. I'm so
Thank
excited to have you with
you.
us.
I'm so excited to be here. Thank you.
Thanks. So let's dive right in with the topic that seems to be on everyone's mind, the bots. What exactly are the application tracking systems or the AI tools that are out there? And how are they impacting the job search process and resume screening? And what should job seekers be concerned about them and know about them?
Great. Thank you. And thank you again for having me. So AI, this is a big part of, resume scanning nowadays. So there's a few different systems. So on the HR side of it, HR uses all of this information to start a file on each of the candidates, for example. So some of it's the HR side, and then some of it is if an HR department has many resumes for a position, they use a tool to help sort. So, for example, where I worked prior, we had an applicant scanning system, and if we were for a major gift officer, for example, we were scanning for certain things on the resume. So the resume would filter through a system and it would be looking for things. It could be how many years of experience or amount raised. Again, if we're looking at, for example, a major gift officer, it could be location, and then it would put when I would open up my email, it would put things into the yes pile and a no pile. And if I wanted to look at the no pile, I could, but it was already sifting these for me. So there's lots of different tips to make sure that you get sifted into that yes pile. And I can go into a few of those if that would be helpful, Shake.
Yeah, let's do that, Lisa.
Sure.
So I call those our digital gatekeepers, right? Even
Yes,
before the
yes, that's a
human,
great term.
um,
Yes,
even before the human is able to look at it. So, what are
correct.
some of those do's and don'ts for the getting past the digital gatekeepers and
Yeah.
getting into the yes pile?
Yes, that's a great question. So I always say to folks, my advice is if you're applying, if we just use the same one, let's just say you're applying for a major gift officer opportunity, look at what the actual job description says. I mean, you might know, you might be a major gift officer. I know what my job is, but look at the actual job description and start using some of those words in your resume. So if it's saying that it wants you to work with donors at the 100,000 plus level, and you're already doing that, put that into your resume. If it says that you need to be raising X amount of money and you are doing that, put that into your resume. So it's literally sorting for something very similar. If it's a regional gift officer and you need to be working with California and Arizona or, the Southwest, put that into add that directly into your resume. And then you can save your resume as something, you can save it as, Vuona resume, and put where you're applying, because sometimes that's helpful. So if you're applying for a position at, MIT, for example, you might put your last name, Vuona resume, MIT, so that when you get the call, because you went into the yes pile, you can pull out and see exactly what resume did I send to them. But I would start looking at the actual job description that they've posted and add some of that exact lingo into your resume.
That's really helpful. Thank you so much for sharing that. I again want to welcome our audience and remind that we can have questions, your questions we want to make sure that we're answering. And so use the chat, let us know where you're joining us from, as well as what questions you have specifically for Lisa. Lisa, let's now talk about, okay, you're looking through your yes pile. It's landed on your desk or your digital screen. As a recruiter, what makes a resume truly stand out to you?
Sure. So if we're looking at the physical part of it first, so what does it look like? There's always a few things I say to folks. Um, you want to make sure that you're using the same, types of things like bullets. It's easy to read. So you don't want to be using arrows and bullets and have lots of different things in different places, because if it's too busy, people won't know where their eyes should go. So keeping, just sort of the same bullets. If you work at a large nonprofit that folks have heard of, for example, I worked at the American Heart Association, you don't necessarily need to put a descriptor on, who the American Heart Association is. But if you work at a smaller nonprofit that maybe somebody might not be aware of what they do, if it's not in the name, you could always put a little line underneath of it, what the mission of the organization is. But again, having some clear cut bullets. I also think, I think you said it, Shake, when we were talking earlier about people take about, 6 or 10 seconds to look at a resume. So making sure that some things are jumping out. So for example, if I'm reviewing a resume and I need to make sure that somebody carries a major gift portfolio, they know what that means. I'm looking immediately for that. I want to know that you've carried a major gift portfolio, how much you've raised. I always caution people against thinking about or writing down percentages, increased giving by 10%, increased giving by 15%, because I won't know what that means. I don't know what it was to start with versus where it ends. So I always say use numbers. Increased giving from 1 million annually to 1.5 million, or whatever the number might be, so that somebody can sort of quantify what those numbers are. I also think that giving space, there are still people that print out resumes. So giving some space on each side that somebody could write a few notes. Sometimes a lot of people just, the first interview is Zoom and they have your resume on one screen and they're Zooming with you on the other. But there are still folks that print these out. So don't put the, margins all the way over, that you want to be able to, that people can make a couple of notes as well. There's also things like, how long should my resume be? I want to condense 30 years into one page. And I always tell people, don't do that, because you'll miss some really vital things. Unless it's a curriculum vitae, you don't need a 10-page resume. But if you've been working for 30 years, you should certainly have a 3-page resume. I think it might have been you, Shake, that said you think about like a page for a decade or something like that. So again, thinking about how long it might be, but you don't want it to be too lengthy that people are hunting for the information, but enough that people, things are standing out. Oh, I see they've, done this, or they are familiar with this territory, or they've done stewardship or events and how successful the events are. So making sure some of those things are standing out.
Thanks, Lisa. I will note, being in the Bay Area, that there are some really creative formats that people have been using. And I think, to add to what you were saying, my advice to folks, and I get lots of friends and family, as well as people in my network, asking me to look at resumes. It's, unless you're applying for a creative job, my recommendation to folks is don't make it super creative and out of the box. Because if I'm working too hard to find the information that I want to look for, then it's the onus is on me now
Right.
to be the detective looking for it.
Yeah.
I see resumes as somebody's marketing tool, right? It's a tool that they're using to get that next conversation.
Right.
It's not the entire life story condensed into one document. And I know it can be awkward because of the ATSs and the bots and the world that we are living in right now.
Yep.
But I also feel like too much color tends to, at least for me, distract me. I'm old school, but what are your thoughts about like the
Yeah.
format, the creative formats that are out there?
Yeah, so the super creative formats, and again, if you're applying for a marketing position that really wants some of that creativity, that could be great. But otherwise, it could be distracting, and people may spend too much time trying to find the information and then sort you into the no pile because they can't figure out very quickly if you've successfully done something. Um, I would also say having too much color. A lot of times I just saw a resume last week, and down the side, probably a good 3 inches was all green. And although pretty, it missed a lot of, you used a lot of space to do that, first of all. And then second of all, if somebody's printing that, they are printing out either all black, if it's a black and white, or they're printing out, that huge section in green. So I always tell folks just to, really keep it a bit more simply, or if you just want to have a color at the top, that's fine, but not a whole section on the side of a color would be really distracting. But I want to say one other thing that I forgot to say about the resume. um, I think one thing that when people are doing a resume, they take their job description and then they sort of translate that into the resume. And although that's showing what you've done, it's not showing your accomplishments and the success that you've had. So it's great to figure out, like, okay, here's what I have done, but you need the success adjectives, how you've successfully done something, or strategically, or I increased giving from X to Y. So your resume should be much more about the things that you've accomplished. You spearheaded a capital campaign effort versus, launched a this, that, or the other thing. So just thinking about some of the ways that you can talk about your successes in your resume as well.
I remember early on when I was working with you and Wendy had told a candidate that to think of their resume as their impact report in the nonprofit sector. And
Yeah,
in a lot of different places,
great.
we talk about impact reports, right? Annual reports. And in the impact report, we don't just passively list the tasks that we did. We talk about the
Right.
so what happened when we did whatever the task was. So as well in terms of things.
Absolutely.
I wanted to jump, given that we have a short amount of time, to a few rapid fire type of questions.
Great.
I know people have asked me a lot in the past about employment gaps. How should job seekers handle those on resumes? What advice do you give them, Lisa?
Yeah, lots of people have gaps, particularly coming out of COVID as well. I was laid off during COVID, so I get it. People have gaps in their resume and just own them. Oftentimes, I tell people this is maybe where to put it in the cover letter. So, you don't need to hide behind it. You can talk about if you took time off to be a caretaker for a family member, you took time off, you were laid off, there was downsizing. Um, Sometimes a better way is to address that in the cover letter. Due to downsizing, I was at XYZ organization for X amount of time, and now I'm looking for a position to do this, this role. But I would probably say most people have a gap in their resume for one thing or another, and you can just own that. But here's what I successfully completed in the time that I was there. But I would probably say resorting to the cover letter to address some of those things so that they're not left with wondering why you're no longer there.
Thank you. I know another popular question is summary statements.
Yeah.
Are they still relevant? And then related to questions, how are they similar to or different from an objective statement? I know for a while objective statements were really popular.
Right. So this is just my opinion on the objective statement. So with objective statements, I think it's something that you'd have to change. If you put them on there, it's fine, but you'd have to change this pretty much every single time you submit a resume because the objective is going to change. So if your objective is to be a major gift officer I'll just keep with MIT because that was my example. Um, you're only applying once to be the MIT major gift officer. But if you're now looking at Harvard or the American Heart Association, that title might also change. So now you have to be mindful that you have to keep changing that objective. And, so a summary statement. And so I'm not opposed to objectives. It's just making sure that it's up to date. If you're, I just read one where somebody said, they're a long-term annual giving person. And, they really liked annual giving, but the role was for a gift officer. So I had asked them to change the objective because I wouldn't want somebody to think they only wanted to be, in the lane of annual giving, which is a fabulous career. But if you're applying for a gift officer, then I would need you to change that because it seems like your objective now is to switch over to major gifts. And I would say the other thing, sometimes resumes come in and it's just all a summary. There's, 10 bullets sort of summarizing someone's career. And then they would have, places that they've worked, just the place that they worked, the date, and the year. And then next line, the place that they worked, the date, and their title, without the bullets underneath, but the summary is up at the top. And I would really caution against doing that because I don't know where you did what bullet. So it's much better to have, that I worked at the American Heart Association. I was the director of recruitment and training, and the 5 bullets underneath of it of what I accomplished during my time there, more so than just one big summary. But a summary section where you're saying, quickly summarizing is great. If you want to put that up at the top, that you successfully went through $100 million capital campaign or some things that you've done, that's fine as long as, you're having some other bullets underneath each of the places that you've worked as well, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. Thank you. I wanted to ask the other thing that comes up is different sections in a resume, right?
Yep.
What are the must have and the nice to have? I think somebody should have work history, somebody
Right.
should have education, but what are some of the other sections that you recommend folks have?
Sure. So, there's the good old skills section, some of the things, and there's always the great debate. Do you have a separate skills section? So, if you're using, Blackbaud or something, or do you put that right into the bullet underneath your work? So if I'm using the same examples, if at the American Heart Association, we used, Razor's Edge, and we also used some other things, am I putting those right underneath the American Heart Association, or am I doing a separate skill section? And one is not better than the other, but if you think it's important, a lot of places are switching over to Salesforce and, from Razor's Edge. So if you have Salesforce experience, I would put that somewhere, whether it's in a separate skills section that you've been utilizing Salesforce and Razor's Edge, or something else, or if you're applying for a marketing position and there's all the the different programs, and planned giving. Planned giving has lots of different kind of marketing technologies that they use as well. I would add those in there as well. And again, it doesn't matter if it's separate, but as long as somebody can easily find it. But gone are the days where people had like Microsoft Office. A lot of people are using that. I don't think you need to put those things unless your job really requires Excel capabilities. There are some functions where you really need to be well versed in Excel. Then I would make sure that's in there somewhere.
Thank you. Again, I just want to remind our listeners that feel free to ask questions if you're watching this on replay at a later time. Ask questions in the comments, and we will monitor them and
Definitely.
answer them as well. And I wanted to ask Lisa, how about personal interests? How do
Oh,
you
sure.
feel about a section where people talk about interests, not volunteer roles, but interests such as running or hiking or whatever it might be?
So I think there are times that this could be relevant. I think there's a few things. It can let me it can I can learn something about a person through that. Oh, they're a runner. This would be really great. They'll be doing the marathon program at such and such institution, and they're also a runner. That's terrific. So if it's relatable, why not put it in there? If you're applying, US Soccer is one of our clients, and it would be great to know if somebody grew up playing soccer, was on a soccer team, they might teach their kids soccer, um, you know, anything like that that would be appropriate that I'll know, oh, you are invested in this. You not only do this as a hobby, but this is a place that you'd like to work as well. Um, I think otherwise, I don't know if it's really relevant. But I do feel like there's a lot of times when your volunteer work is important. So if you're applying to, the MSPCA and you volunteer at, Second Chance Animal Shelter, I would absolutely put that in there because that shows not only I have a passion for animals, I want to do this for a living, but I'm doing this part-time in my spare time. I'm not getting paid for it. So I do think putting those things, and I think there's a lot of people that have sort of side gigs, as Wendy always calls them. There are folks that sell things on the side. They, not only have a full-time job being a major gift officer, but they also, do some sales things on the side. Or, Wendy and I interviewed somebody that was a real estate agent on the side. And, that's still part of sales. And it shows that you have that hustle to do that as well. So if you do have some type of a side gig, I would absolutely put that on your resume because that can also be counted as years of experience towards something as well.
So, for folks who might be starting out in their career or returning to the workforce after taking a break, would you recommend instead of, let's say, having work or employment history or work experience, maybe putting experience and meshing in the volunteer and the paid employment together?
Yeah, and the same can be true for people that do some consulting. There are folks that take some time to, whether it's raise a family or care for someone, but they're also doing some consulting during that time. Putting all of those things in there. So putting that they've done some consulting and sometimes that's paid, sometimes that's not. And putting in, volunteer experience, led these different efforts, led the effort for the capital campaign at my child's school, and all the different things, working with volunteer committees, recruiting people, going through everything with the volunteer committees, and how much was raised. There's lots of people that do that as a side hustle. They're partnering with the board members. It's a lot of work, but with, let's say they're raising $30 million or whatever the capital campaign might be, I would absolutely put that on a resume. So that somebody, and in a cover letter, if that's important to the job, of course. If, knowing a capital campaign or having to raise X amount of money, I would definitely put that in your resume.
Thanks. Similarly, I've advised people if they are, let's say, a troop leader or a leader and a volunteer, if they were the president of whatever association or organization that they were volunteering for,
Yes.
I say
Yes.
include that information because it shows leadership skills and management skills,
Mhm.
right? It's very transferable. What are your thoughts on that?
Absolutely. And it shows initiative. I worked for someone, and she would say, I don't want to just know that somebody is a member of AFP or they're just a member of something. I want to know that they were on the committee, the programming committee for the event in Boston, or I want to know that they were a board member or they were on a committee for doing something, because it shows initiative and involvement, that they're not just, and it's great to attend, AFP. I'm on the board of AFP. They're great. But showing that you're doing something that is a bit more than just being in attendance. Or if you are in attendance, showing, I've gone every year for 5 years and I really enjoy X, Y, and Z about it. And I want to say, could I add one thing about a cover letter? I know we're not talking about cover letters, but they do oftentimes go hand in hand with your resume. And I would say you don't need to kind of regurgitate what's in the resume, but you do want to highlight some things, and you're highlighting the items that are in the job description that you're applying for. So if it's, looking for capital campaign experience, looking for somebody carrying a portfolio, you're going to use some fabulous, adjectives to talk about how great that is, because you have, one shot to make a first impression. And a cover letter does not need to be a dissertation, 10 pages. It's just 2 paragraphs. One paragraph, how my background has prepared me for this great role. And, the second paragraph, really, why am I interested in working at XYZ institution and why this particular role right now? I know you didn't ask that, but
No,
sometimes people
I
don't know
think
where to start with the cover letter.
and it's such an interesting thing because I know, at least again in the tech industry in the Bay Area, they've stopped taking cover
Absolutely.
letters. So it's a really interesting space where I always advise people submit a cover letter, even if nobody reads it. At least it's there for people who
Right.
do want to read it. But I do know that it's a little bit of a industry specific, and
It
some
is.
nonprofits are moving away from cover letters too. So the other related thing that I always, when I look at and work with colleagues and friends, say is, I know we're not talking LinkedIn, but make sure your resume and LinkedIn match. The dates
Yeah.
match, the
Yes.
information
Yes.
match, the title matches. I can't tell you how many times I've looked and one shows they're still employed at a place, and the other one is like, no, I left 6 months ago. It's like, which
Right.
is the truth? So that those are important additional things that sometimes becomes a red flag and could put you in the no
Right.
list, right? So.
Absolutely, because they want to make sure that you're being transparent and honest. And I would say, you just made me think of one other thing, Shake, in thinking about your resume, making sure the tense is in the present. So if I'm currently working at Boyden, my resume has all the present tense, and making sure my past positions have past tense. And it might seem, obvious, but oftentimes, because you're going through your resume really quickly, making sure that those things are, past versus present tense.
Thank you. We're coming up on time. You've covered so much, Lisa. I thank you
Thank
so much
you.
for this time. Any final words of advice or things to remember quickly before we wrap up?
Yes, I would say go for it. If you're applying for a position and it says you need to have, this much experience and you might be a little bit shy of it, go for it. And explain in your cover letter why you are applying for this position and why you would rock that role. So I always say, you'll get 0% of the chances that you don't take, and always take a chance at it.
I love that.
Thank
Thank
you.
you so much, Lisa, for making the time for this conversation. Thanks to our listeners. Again, if you're watching later on and you have specific questions, please put the
Absolutely.
information in chat. We'll monitor it and ask questions. On behalf of everyone who will watch this video, who watched us live, Lisa, thank you very
Oh, thank
much
you so
for
much.
your time and advice. It's really helpful, especially in this day and age where there are a million different ways somebody can go with their resume. So,
Absolutely. Thank you
um,
so much. I appreciate it.
thanks, everyone. Have a fantastic rest of your day.
Thank you.